Welcome to the SCI Forum podcast. This podcast was produced by the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System in the University of Washington Department of Rehabilitation Medicine. The Northwest Regional SCI system is dedicated to improving the lives of people with SCI through excellent patient care, research, and education. To learn more about our podcasts and videos or to make a donation, go to sci.washington.edu. This podcast was taken from a live SCI Forum presentation and may refer to images or visual information that helps to illustrate the spoken content. You can watch the video on our website or YouTube channel. Go to sci.washington.edu/videos.
Hello and welcome to the Spinal Cord Injury Forum. My name is Heather Barnett. I'm a spinal cord injury physician in the Department of Rehab Medicine at the University of Washington, and I'm the director of the Northwest Regional Spinal Cord Injury System. Tonight we are pleased to welcome Carl Leon from the Seattle Office of Emergency Management, who will be presenting on emergency preparedness. Welcome, Carl, and thank you for being here.
I guess that's my cue. Good evening, everybody. As she mentioned, my name is Carl Leon. I'm a volunteer with the Seattle Office of Emergency Management. I've been doing these presentations for, since right after the big Japan earthquake and tsunami, so about a dozen years now. Some links, and I will repeat these at the end of the presentation, so if I go advance before you're done scribbling them all down, don't panic. The Office of Emergency Management has a very comprehensive web page, seattle.gov/emergency-management. You can email them, oem@seattle.gov. You're welcome to email me if you have questions or need anything you want to follow up with in the future, carl.leon@seattle.gov. A couple of other links, a couple more links worth mentioning, seattleemergencyhubs.org, and we'll talk about them a little later. And a couple of unofficial links, youtube.com/Seattle Prepares is a good YouTube channel that has a lot of information. And a handout, a website of my own, n7kuw.com/handouts with a capital H. And that is going to give you the laundry list on the left of this screen, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This isn't a pretty website, it's just a list of links. But on the right side of the screen, you'll see a list of, a readable, legible list of everything that's on that site. And it's the handouts document that's on the site. So if the first thing you do is go on the sites, and down here on the left you see an arrow pointing to handouts, download that, then you'll have the decipherable list on the right that can help you interpret between which handout you're looking for and what it might be called in that laundry list. Back up real quick, this is the Emergency Management's website, and there are a number of drop-down menus and different links here. There is an incredible amount of information at this website. You can spend hours browsing through it and looking at different things, and it's worth spending some time on. But we're going to cover basically the key items that you're looking for in disaster preparedness in this presentation tonight. So Seattle is vulnerable to a lot of disasters. I'm used to wandering around and they've nailed my feet to the floor so I don't wander out of camera range. So pardon my fidgeting. One of the jobs in emergency management is to figure out what all those hazards are, and they prioritize them through a laundry list of different categories to put them in the order that you see them here. At the top of the list is earthquakes, and it goes down through all kinds of different hazards to the least likely volcanic hazards. These are prioritized based on a variety of categories, how often they happen, what's the impact if they do happen, both to individuals as citizens of the city as well as to the city itself, the infrastructure, the economics of the city, and so forth. And Earthquakes, although they are very infrequent, have a incredibly huge adverse potential, and that's why they came out at the top of the list. Snow and ice has relatively little impact, but we get it every year, and usually it messes us up for a week or so every winter, and that week can have some impact on all kinds of things. And on down through the list, you can read it as to all the different potential hazards that we may be looking at and that do occur. Power outages fairly regularly, spot outages around the city. Cyber attacks are becoming more prevalent. Landslides, there are certain areas in the city of Seattle that are very vulnerable to landslides. Disease outbreaks, certainly we are aware of that from recent experience. Flooding can happen anywhere near a shoreline, and we have a lot of shoreline, and it can also happen along rivers, creeks, and stuff like that. And on down the list. Earthquakes we'll talk a little bit about. There are three general categories of earthquakes: crustal or shallow earthquakes, intraplate or deep earthquakes, subduction zone or megathrust earthquakes. The crustal or shallow earthquakes happen very infrequently, about every 1,100 years or so. The most recent one we've had of major magnitude was over 1,000 years ago. The most recent one on the Seattle fault line was in 1945, about a magnitude 7, centered around North Bend. Those are shallow quakes. They are typically a depth of less than 10 miles, and the Seattle fault line runs right under our feet, and as a result, they have the potential of producing a very damaging earthquake in the city. Magnitude 7 earthquake that's right under our feet and at a shallow depth can do a lot of damage. Intraplate or deep earthquakes, that's what we experienced with the Nisqually earthquake in 2001, magnitude 6.5 or so, 6.8. And that was about 60 miles south of here, and it was about 60 miles deep. And as a result, even though it was a fairly large magnitude, 6.8, the damage in Seattle was relatively minor. There were some cracked chimneys and broken facades and other damage, but no catastrophic damage in the city. They average over all of the last several that you've seen there, the average is about 20 years, but the minimum is 3 years between earthquakes and the maximum is, 56 years. So they are unpredictable despite the numbers. Earthquakes don't read calendars, they just happen when they're ready to happen. And then the subduction zone or megathrust earthquake. This is the Cascadia fault line that runs along the Pacific Ocean from British Columbia to Northern California. It is capable of producing a magnitude 9 or larger earthquake. It has most recently about 300 years ago in 1700. They average about every 500 years. So we're sneaking up on being due for a Cascadia earthquake, but again, you can't predict by average time when they're actually going to happen. The magnitude 9 earthquake, even though it would be 100 miles west of us, has the potential of producing enormous damage in the city as well as tsunami along the entire Pacific coast, and a much smaller but possible tsunami in through Puget Sound. So there are multiple risks from the megathrust earthquake. Here's some pictures. The black and white pictures are from 1949, I think, and the color pictures are from the Nisqually earthquake. And you just get an example of some kind of the damage that can happen from earthquakes in Seattle. Anything from scattered store shelves to the bottom picture, third over, is the King County Airport Boeing Field, and a crack was generated all the way down the runway at Boeing Field, put it out of service for about a week. You see some landslides there, damaged vehicles. A couple now has a huge view window in their apartment that wasn't there before, etc. Earthquakes can do all kinds of fun things. The rubble in the street in the black and white pictures is a good example of what's dangerous in populated areas like downtown Seattle. If you're near a big building, you don't want to be next to it outside when an earthquake happens. There are a couple of different tools that you can use online to help you determine what the risks are and what you can do to prepare for them. Seattle's emergency management website, if you go to that website, there is a link to the Seattle Hazard Explorer, and it lets you go in and poke around and learn a lot of stuff about different hazards, and it also lets you look and see specific to a location what hazards can occur at that location. You can look and see at this exact building what the risks are, or at your home in Laurelhurst or Sandpoint or wherever it might be. There's a King County tool called hazardready.org/Seattle, and it does much the same, just a different website from a different organization. They are both very useful tools to investigate and research hazards that could occur at your location. This is the Seattle Hazard Explorer, just at a glimpse. And there are different earthquake scenarios you can look at, floods, wildfires, air quality, landslides. You can explore every kind of hazard that's there and see where they are, what neighborhoods within the city are at risk to the various hazards. You can see different earthquake impacts. You can see impacts based on different population categories. You can see this is an example of a Seattle fault earthquake, and north of the Ship Canal we are not nearly as vulnerable as most of the rest of the city from a Seattle fault earthquake, but there is still a lot of risk. It's just an enormous amount of information that you can explore to find out what the potential risks and hazards are. Now, know the reality. Events happen all the time. Every day we have something going on. Most don't impact the majority of people. Most don't cause significant damage. Most don't have a huge economic impact, but they can disrupt your life if you just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. A local power outage and you require power, it's the middle of winter, it's 0 degrees outside and you don't have heat. You use an oxygen generating machine and you don't have power. Hazards can affect you at the individual level all the way up to community and citywide level. But any hazard can disrupt your life. It doesn't mean that the big worst case earthquake is going to happen and tear the city apart before it can cause impact on you. So being prepared for any hazard is what you want to do. Regardless of what comes along, then you have a better chance of coming out of it comfortable and unscathed. Medium events happen regularly, but most only still impact a minority of people. Think of a major traffic incident that closes a freeway or a bridge for an extended period of time. A lot of people are stuck in traffic. A lot of people miss appointments and important meetings. Doctor's appointments, all kinds of things are impacted by that. You could spend hours sitting at the wheel not going anyplace. That happens fairly often anymore. Major events happen very infrequently, but they can impact a lot larger percentage of people all at once. So if we have an earthquake, a significant earthquake, the whole city's going to be impacted. We could have major power outages that cover, several months ago we had one that covered most of the north end of Seattle, and a lot of people were without power for many hours. So there's an example of different things. The bomb cyclone we had a while back affected damage, wind damage to a lot of people, as well as power outages to a lot of people. So all kinds of different hazards can happen. That doesn't mean that any given hazard is going to impact you directly, but it could. And being aware of that is what's important, and knowing how you can prepare in advance should that happen. So catastrophic disasters happen very infrequently, but impact a large majority or all of the population, and they typically are going to require national or international response for recovery. In a catastrophic disaster, we'll go through all the worst case things that can impact you, but keep in mind, this is only if the big one comes along, be it the Seattle fault quake or the Cascadia quake. You're not going to be able to get any place. Roads are going to be damaged, bridges are going to be closed, inoperable, and when a bridge closes, it's If they can get it open, it's going to be kept in the open position because maritime traffic has priority over land traffic. Stores are going to run out of supplies. When you see a hurricane coming to the Gulf Coast or the East Coast, everybody runs to the stores for 2 or 3 days in advance. We won't get 2 or 3 days notice. So as soon as an earthquake happens, everybody's going to run to the store and empty the shelves if you can get to a store, if there's a store open, whatever. Plan in advance so you don't have to buy after the incidents. Utilities will probably be damaged. Electricity, water, sewer, internet connectivity, all of those are most likely going to go away in a big disaster. And they could go away in smaller ones depending on what that is. Gas stations and ATM machines aren't going to work. If they require stores, anything electronic transaction, debit card, credit card, Google Pay, whatever, requires both connectivity and power to work. Gas stations need power for the gas pumps to work. So if you can't tap your card, you're not going to be able to buy something. Even if their store is open and even if there's merchandise on the shelf, if you can't pay for it, you're not going to get it. How can you pay for it? Cash. That could become king after a disaster. Hospitals are going to be overwhelmed. They're going to be triaging in the parking lots, and only the worst case are going to get through the door for any kind of treatment. You're going to become your own, each other's resource. If you haven't had a first aid CPR class, try to find one and take one. And to this audience in particular, you're caring for people with spinal injuries and things like that. Know what you need to be able to do for the patient that has those injuries. Know how you can move them, comfort them, do whatever you need to do. And I know nothing about that. All I can do is say that's a special medical case that you need to be prepared to provide that assistance, because it's unlikely that professional responders are going to be available to do that. Phones, cable TV, and internet are probably not going to work. First responders initially aren't going to be there to help you. The Seattle Fire Department, immediately following a major incident, an earthquake for example, their first job is to go out and do what they call a windshield survey. They assess the condition of the city. All of the fire battalions have predetermined routes they're going to try to operate on, and they're going to drive right past everybody trying to wave them down for help so they can get the big picture, communicate that into the Central Fire Operations Center so that they can start prioritizing and strategizing how they're going to respond to the situation in the city. And at any given moment, there may be 200 or 300 firefighters on duty in the city of Seattle at fire stations. There may be 200 or 300 police officers on duty at police precincts or in patrol cars. There's not a lot of emergency responders on the job 24/7. Most of the employees are daytime employees, just like most of you are. And most of them live somewhere that isn't at the location they work. So if we have like a big earthquake, it's going to be very difficult for additional resources to respond to the city so they can start responding to you. It could be a period of time before you are able to get emergency response. And that's what you need to plan for and prepare for. So step one is to develop a plan. Figure out, what am I going to do? A plan is just a laundry list of what ifs. What if I can't go anyplace? What if I'm here, she's there, my wife is somewhere else, you got kids there somewhere else, parents are somewhere else. No alternate routes to and from your home, your work, any place you need to go. No plans for your work, your children's schools or daycare. If you work, both your employer and your landlord, if they're separate, should have emergency plans. You should know what those plans are. If you have kids in school, you should know what the school's plans are. They have plans. The most important probably is a reunification plan. How do you get the kids reunited to the proper people? And every school has a plan for that. And if the person you send to get your kid isn't on the list they've got of approved people, they're not going to let your kid go to that person. That's necessary, and that's what you really want, but you need to make sure your contact information and your plans are current with the school. What if you have no electricity? For most of us, that's an inconvenience. If you're on an oxygen machine, or if you're doing dialysis at home, or if you have some other essential piece of equipment that is critical to your life, you need to have an alternate electricity plan. Either a generator at home or possibly solar, but most solar in the city is grid tie without battery backup, so it's not going to do you any good if grid power is down. It shuts off automatically. So have battery backups, whatever, enough to get you by until you can get more. What if you have no water service? You should have water stored for both drinking as well as hygiene and cooking and everything you use water for. The recommendation is a gallon of water per person per day for 2 weeks. That's the recommendation. That's a lot of water, but that's for everything you use water for, not just for hydrating. You can live on 6 to 8 ounces of water a day if it's not the desert Southwest in the middle of summer. What if you can't occupy your home? What are your shelter alternatives? Do you have camping gear? Do you have a recreational vehicle? Do you have a tent? Do you have anything? I've got a detached garage, which is much newer than my house and is much more likely to survive an earthquake than my house is. That's my backup plan. And if it goes down, then hopefully the neighbor's house won't go down. There's got to have some planning, have some awareness of what your options are. And if you have pets, make sure your plans include food, water, whatever for them, as well as for yourself, your family. So these are all things to think about, and you can come up with your own list of a dozen other things to think about. Write them down. You don't have to get prepared by tomorrow morning. You need to start preparing if you're not already prepared, and you need to continue preparing if you are already started or prepared. Review your preparations. How recently did you change your water out? How old is your food, etc. And figure out how you're going to keep that current over time so that at any point in time you are prepared should something happen. I was asked to address some of these questions for this audience, and sadly I can't give you a lot of specific advice, but I will go through the list. What do you do with people with spinal cord injuries or similar disabilities? You have to address those in your plans. And like I said earlier, I'm not an expert on spinal cord or any medical condition. You know more about the situation than I ever will. So build that into your plans and ask the what-if questions surrounding that situation so that you have a plan to deal with it. Mobility issues, wheelchairs, power or regular, again, plan that into your situation. It may be very difficult to get any kind of wheeled device around after an earthquake. And in a home, if you've got the potential for a lot of clutter after an earthquake, that's going to make that even more difficult. So within the home or within your living environment, look at what could be a hazard to any mobility device and plan for that in how you prepare for an earthquake. If you have power equipment, as I mentioned before, you need to have plans on how you can survive for a day, for a week, for a couple of weeks as part of your plans. You may not be able to achieve that, especially short term, but you can start planning for that and how you'll address it over time. My neighbor across the street bought the house about 12 years ago, and it's got 2 sump pumps in the basement. In their first winter there, they had a power outage, and their basement was getting ready to flood seriously. Fortunately, I had a generator, and he borrowed it and saved his house from disaster that night. He now has a whole home generator installed that starts automatically and can run for 3 days. He did that because that was necessary for the protection of his home. Not for comfort, not for convenience, but the necessity of keeping his sump pumps running. It took him a number of years before he achieved that, but he became aware of that the first winter he was there. Mobility issues, as noted above, make sure there's potential routes to move them, and if they're powered, make sure you have backup power, spare batteries, whatever. Medications, stock up on medications. I'm an old guy. I'm on a lot of pills. Every time I see my doctor, they add to or change my medications. I get them by mail order, 90 days at a whack. I'm going to step off camera for just a moment, but I'll be back, said Arnold. And I have this little backpack that goes with me any place I am that is outside of my home and is more than walking distance from my home. And inside that backpack, I have a waterproof container with a week's worth of prescription medications. That's always with me, always. I will never not have pills for at least a week. And if I can get back home, I've got more. That's preparing. That's being prepared. If medications are important to you, then figure out how you can put a few aside and build an emergency supply. Ventilators, need for generator, etc. They plan in advance and plan specific to your needs. I put in a small off-grid solar system at my house. It won't run my house. It's not tied to the grid, but I do have batteries, and I can run for several days minimal stuff. I can keep a refrigerator going. I can run my furnace, which is a gas furnace, the essentials for several days. So even in the dead of winter, I can get by if I have to for a short period of time. And that's an example of, and I use a CPAP. It'll cover the CPAP also. Ventilators, need for generators. Again, spare batteries, whatever you can do for your specific situation. Most medical equipment is going to have backup battery options. Explore them, budget them, include them in your preparations. Communications with emergency personnel ahead of time. That's a tough one, and as I mentioned, most 911 level resources aren't even going to be available immediately after a major disaster. They will be available after minor situations. You can get help. You can call for help. You can get it. Major disasters probably aren't going to be available to respond to you for a period of time. So include that in your plans and preparations. How to get people off of Mercer Island if the bridges are not available. Off of any island. Mercer Island, Whidbey Island, Vashon Island, pick an island. That's a challenge, and we are a region with a lot of islands that are going to have a lot of stranded people. I can't answer that for any of the island communities. All I can suggest is you contact your local emergency management for your location to find out what plans, if any, they have for emergency response transportation to from the island. I did do a presentation like this several years ago, and there was a person in the audience who worked in Seattle but lived on the Kitsap Peninsula, and he happened to be a member of the Church of Latter-day Saints who happened to, in general, be pretty preparedness oriented. And that's not a plug, that's just a statement of fact. They actually have a fleet, a mosquito fleet of boats planned to come to Seattle to pick up the people that are part of their church to take them back across Puget Sound should the ferry service go down, should there be a major disaster. That's an example of community or group planning that you can do. So for any of these, again, I'd love to be the expert of everything that could tell you exactly what to do in every case. I can't. You need to figure that out. You need to look at the options, the costs, the opportunities, and prepare yourself as best you can. And even a little bit is better than nothing. So if all you do is go out and buy 2 days worth of water and stock it under your bed, you're a step ahead of where you are now if you don't have that. So a little bit, start. It's a start. And then keep building on that start until you're where you want to be. A communication plan. These things are probably not going to work in a big disaster, okay? They rely on a local cell tower within half a mile or a mile in a big urban environment like this. And if they can't find that, they're going to crank up the power and try harder to talk to a cell tower. And if they can't find one within range, they're going to keep trying until the battery's dead. So have you ever gone someplace where there is no cell service and seen how fast your cell battery goes down? That's what's going to happen if we have a big incident here. Your cell battery is going to go down because there's not going to be a cell tower for your phone to talk to. So you want to turn these off. I mean, all the way off, not just screen off. Or put them into airplane mode so the radio part isn't working. That'll save your battery and make it last a lot longer. Check periodically. Turn it on in an hour or two, see if you got a signal. Turn it off if you don't have one. Texting is going to work better than voice calls. If I try to call my wife, her phone and my phone both have to be on at the same time, working on the system for that call to go through. If I send her a text, even if I'm not online, as soon as I do get a signal, that text will go from my phone into the cell system, and it will stay in the cell system until it can find her phone and send it to her. Texting is going to work a lot better than any kind of voice call. Establish text message groups. Send a text to the group. It's going to use less of your phone and the cellular system around you resources. Social media, if it's working, can be an incredibly valuable resource. All the city departments have social media accounts, X now, it used to be whatever it was. You can follow them, and if social media is working, there's a lot of information that can be made available. It has proven to be a very valuable resource to find lost people, to connect families back together. It has also proven to be a very powerful resource for scamming, so be careful. Don't make voice calls unless absolutely necessary. And I've talked about preserving the phone battery, but also the more you try to make calls, the faster your battery's going to go down, and it's going to tie up the system more. So make sure it rises to the level of emergency that really is justified to make that phone call before you try it. There are other options you can consider. There is direct-to-satellite cellular service you can get now through T-Mobile and Starlink. You can get other devices that will do satellite communications. If emergency communications is really, really important to you, there are options to explore other than just your normal cell phone. My wife and I are also both amateur radio operators, and there's another radio service called GMRS, which works very much the same. You need a license for either one. You need a test to be a ham. You don't need a test for a GMRS license. So two-way radios might be a solution, might not. Depends on where you're trying to talk and all kinds of things. But there are have a communications plan and explore what the different possibilities and options are for that to serve your needs. OEM put this slide in just so you're aware that insurance and government assistance, don't rely on FEMA to make you better. At best, you'll get $35,000 out of them. So you need to have your own insurance and your own means of recovery, whatever it is. And as you've seen in the wildfires in California recently, there's a lot of people without houses down there, and there's a lot of people that are fighting their insurance companies trying to get made better that aren't there yet. So check your insurance, know what it covers, understand that you won't get well immediately, and plan accordingly. Know your neighborhood's plan. The strongest resource you're going to have after in a disaster situation are your immediate neighbors. In Seattle, we have a thing called the Community Emergency Hubs. They are a grassroots citizen-run effort. They are not a city-run effort, but the city is aware of them and cooperates fully with their program and with what they're doing. SeattleEmergencyHubs.org is a website that will take you to a map that you can find the nearest hub or any hub in the city, and you can also get other information, a lot of resources at that website. SNAP, Seattle Neighborhoods Actively Prepare, is an official Seattle program. In many surrounding communities, they have something called CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. It is training that they put a team together of people and train them on how to be a low-level emergency response for your block, for your neighborhood. SNAP is, the concept is a little different than CERT, but it is getting you and your neighbors organized in advance to how you can respond and support each other should a disaster or an emergency occur. And OEM will do SNAP meetings with you or your neighbors in the city of Seattle, and if you're outside Seattle, check with your local emergency management for a Map Your Neighborhood, MYN, which is a similar and actually better program than what Seattle has. So there are resources if you plan. It's part of planning in advance and preparing in advance. You are going to be each other's best initial responder. So what are your response priorities for a SNAP group or a CERT group? Controlling utilities and preventing fires. You want to initially turn off water to preserve any water that you got in your house and not to let any contaminated water in. You initially do not want to turn off gas unless you have suspicion of a gas leak. If you smell gas, if you hear hissing out of your gas pipe, turn the gas off. You don't want a gas leak to catch fire and burn down your house or a neighborhood. But otherwise, the recommendation is if you turn your gas off, that you don't turn it back on until the utility can come out and professionals can turn it back on, make sure the pipes are not leaking, relight pilot lights, make sure everything's safe, etc. If you're comfortable doing that, you can turn your gas back on. There's no law that says you can't, but the recommendation is if you turn it off, you leave it off until utilities can come out and turn it back on. That could be a while, and if it's the dead of winter, that could be your heat or cooking. So control utilities, check on people. You're your own search and rescue. Find where the neighbors' kids are. They're the old people that live in the neighborhood, and I'm one, so I can say old people with full respect. Find out where the people that might have the greater need are in your neighborhood so that you can check on them. Take care of injuries. If you haven't had a first aid class, take a first aid class. There's another program which is really good called Stop the Bleed. If you haven't had a Stop the Bleed class, try to take a Stop the Bleed class. That's more specialized on stopping arterial bleeding from which you can die much faster. So both are well worth looking into and taking. After that, shelter and take care of each other, yourselves. Damage assessment, homes, utilities, streets. Find out what the situation is and then start working towards recovering and resolving. Communications, listen to radio for current information, share with family and neighbors. Have a battery-powered portable radio as part of your disaster kit so that you can turn it. Probably there will be a radio station on the air in the city. Don't know which one. There could be a lot that aren't, but probably one or more will be. The city is going to put out information to any media that's out there, and if you got a portable radio that can listen to it, you're going to have a way to get information. Connect with other neighbors and or with your local emergency hub. Do the SNAP group organization with your neighbors if you haven't done that. And I've mentioned most of this. Know who your neighbors are and know the skills in your neighborhood. There's typically when I do a presentation, there's a very diverse range of skills in the audience. It's amazing when you bring 10 or 15 people together how many different layers of expertise there might be. And that's the same with the block you live on or the building you live in. There's somebody in that building that probably knows the answer to your question. Make a map of your neighborhood. Know where utilities are, know where supplies are, etc. And this is something you would organize with you and your neighbors. I mentioned the hub, SeattleEmergencyHubs.org. If you go to their website, there's a map. If you zoom in on the map to your location, you can see where different hubs are. I just randomly picked one that's fairly close to here, and it's the Ravenna Park hub I circled in red. If you click on that hub, on the left you'll see contact information for it, who to get a hold of, where it's located, and all kinds of stuff. So the hub is a really valuable potential neighborhood resource, and they're all over the city. Many of the hubs have two-way radio resources as part of their hub, so they can get information to and from the city. It's a communications channel as well as a needs and resources matching channel. So the hub is really a potentially powerful resource. Home hazard mitigation and retrofitting. This is a short video clip here of a test house that was built on a shake table after the Loma Prieta earthquake in California. And when I run the video, you're going to see what happens to everything in the house. So go through your house and secure anything that's going to hurt you if you have an earthquake and it's not secure. Yeah, that's a false ceiling, but above that is HVAC, all kinds of electrical, etc. You want to not be vulnerable to it. Go on a 30-minute home hazard hunt. Identify what the hazards are and then make a plan to start fixing them. Here's the first of two videos. So what you saw there is that if it wasn't strapped down, nailed down, or secured somehow, it fell over. And that's what's going to happen in your home. File cabinets, water heater, all kinds of stuff. And if you happen to be sitting there when it falls on you, it's going to hurt. So this is an upstairs bedroom in that same structure. The bed's on the lower right. And those speakers will definitely give you a headache if they land on you. So there's examples of what can be hazards in your home. Do a 30-minute walkthrough of your house. Find everything that's got the potential of hurting you if you had an earthquake, and then make a plan on how you're going to secure it and take care of it. Build a kit. Be prepared to be on your own for 14 days. It used to be the recommendation was 3 days, and then they went to a week, and now they're saying 14 days. The reason for the 14 days in this area is if we have Cascadia fault, most of the roads east and west are going to be damaged. They're not going to be able to drive resources in, and it's going to affect everything on the west coast from Canada to California. So we're not going to be able to get help from our neighbors. So it's going to take a while to get that in, all the resources, the response, staged east of the mountains like Moses Lake, using vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, helicopters and V-22s, ferrying it over the mountains, and then setting up distribution points and resources to start helping people. That takes time. It could be a while before there are points of distribution where you can get food, water, medication, or whatever. So that's why they want you to be on your own for 2 weeks. Think about what you use on a daily basis, food, water, being able to stay warm and dry. Hypothermia will kill you faster than lack of water. So if you get cold and wet, and that's very possible in the Pacific Northwest, you need a way to get warm and dry and to stay that way. Safe light source. Anything that burns isn't safe. Candles are not a good answer for post-earthquake light or heat. And I mentioned medication and health already. Having emergency medical supplies, whatever they are, to last you for a period of time is important. Have a kit in your car, have a kit at work, have a get-home bag, just big enough for the critical essentials. I showed you mine already, it's not quite that big, but my get-home bag will get me to my car. My car hopefully will get me to the supplies in my car will get me to my home. My home has more supplies. It's a good plan, assuming I can ultimately get to my home. And if I can't, I've got enough in the car for 2 or 3 days. Examples of things you should include in your get home bag: food and water, sturdy shoes, walking shoes. I mean, you may not be able to drive any place. You may be on foot, and having a good pair of walking shoes will help. Something to keep dry, a paper map. Wow, I mean, I don't even know if you can buy a paper map anymore, but you might want to download all the local maps to whatever mapping program you use on your phone so that you can use them offline. A whistle. I've got a whistle in there, and I can blow a whistle a lot longer than I can holler. My voice is going to go hoarse. I'm sorry, I keep hitting the microphone. Sorry for your ears. Yeah, I'll go hoarse before I can stop blowing the whistle. I can blow the whistle a lot longer. Plus, if you hear a whistle tooting, it's going to get your attention. You're going to say, "Oh, what's that whistle? Where is it?" and go looking for it. You may not even hear my voice. You know, it's mask. There's going to be a lot of dust, a lot of debris, a lot of potentially dangerous air particles, etc. Extra batteries for anything that you have that uses batteries. Cash. I mentioned already that we're going to become a cash-only society for a period of time. So having some cash in your emergency supplies is a good idea. How much is entirely up to you. Make it small bills. If you walk into a store with a $50 bill to buy a 5-cent candy bar, it's going to cost you $50 because they're probably not going to be able to make change. Picture of family and pets. 2 reasons for that. The first is I can take my phone out and say, "That's a picture of my wife. Have you seen her?" Or, "That's a picture of my dog. Have you seen him?" The other is I'm stuck under a pile of rubble and the only thing I've got is a picture of my wife to keep me comfort. Might, you know. So good reason to have pictures of families and pets. Emergency phone numbers. There's a couple of handouts for people in the room, but there are also, these can be downloaded. These can be downloaded from a link I'll show you in a minute. This is a plan and prepare, things to do and stock up on. This is a whole bunch of blank lines, and it's for you to write down all the phone numbers that you no longer remember because they're all automatically in your telephone. Who remembers phone numbers anymore? And insurance policy information and doctors' names and whatever. This is your contact list for a disaster. Have it as part of your pack. Have it all written down because I don't remember phone numbers. What to do during an earthquake. Drop, cover, and hold. I mentioned the false ceiling in here, HVAC, electrical, and all kinds of stuff are above it. If we have an earthquake, all of that's going to fall down. It is going to collapse. The ceiling may not, the building may not, but the false ceiling will. You need to get under something. Drop, cover, and hold. Get under something that's going to protect you from everything that's falling. Hang on until the shaking stops. Then you can get out of the area. If you're outside and you're anywhere near a big building, you don't want to be there. You want to either get back in that building if it's the closest route or get away from it if that's the closest route. The best way to, whatever you can do so that you're not beside a big building. Otherwise, if you're outside, sit down, cover your head with your arms, and just protect yourself until the shaking stops. If you're driving, pull over to the side of the road, wait till the shaking stops, etc. After an earthquake, check on yourself, check on your home, check on others, find out more information. And I've mentioned that. AM, FM radio, go to a hub, do whatever you can to find out information. Here are a couple of pictures that are actually from hurricanes, but I use them to exemplify assessing your home after an earthquake. If that were your home on the left side of this picture, would you go back inside after an earthquake? I mean, I'm not an architect, I'm not a structural engineer, I'm not a professional, but common sense would tell me I probably don't want to go back and stay in that structure because there's liable to be aftershocks, and it doesn't look like it. It looks like it's still standing after the hurricane in this case, but earthquake, but it may not be standing after the next aftershock. The picture on the right is why you drop, cover, and hold. You don't want all that stuff that's landing, in this case, on the floor of that building, landing on you. So hurricanes or earthquakes both present hazards. These were easy to find pictures, but earthquake is exactly the same scenario. Emergency sanitation. Plumbing is probably not going to work. If you have a commode that's physically intact, but the water's not working, you can line it with plastic bags and use it to do your business. Take the bags out, tie them up, put them away until the city guides you on what they're going to do for pickup and disposal. If you don't have a commode that's structurally strong enough to sit on, you can buy these things called luggable loos, or you can buy the 5-gallon bucket without the toilet seat, a little cheaper, and take a pool loop thing, foam, fiberglass, or cushion. Do something to cushion the edge of the bucket just so you can sit on it. And the suggestion is to have 2 of those, one for liquid waste and one for solid waste. And again, store the waste until you get guidance on what to do with it. Know how and when to control utilities. I've already talked about that pretty much. Turn the gas off only if necessary. Otherwise, you should turn your water off. Know where your water shut-off valve is. There's typically going to be 2 on a house, one outside and one inside. If you don't have the inside one, you still will have the outside one by the water meter. Check your water valve, shut-off valve, and make sure you know how to turn it and are able to. Get more information, Alert Seattle messages, and we haven't talked about it yet, but Seattle has its own, it's kind of like reverse 911, but you have to opt into it. You have to sign up for it, and it's called Alert Seattle. And here in the room, I've got some cards that everybody can take, but there should be Alert Seattle information on the list of handouts that you can get remotely. I'll show you the link. And you have to opt into this, but you can select text, emails, or voice phone calls, or all 3. And if the city sends out information, it will go to you. They don't spam, they don't send anything unnecessarily, and they got the public disclosure laws changed so they do not have to provide lists of who signed up for Alert Seattle. They have made it very secure to protect your information. Follow city departments on social media, and go to the hub. More about Alert Seattle. Disaster skills training. The city has done, I don't think they're doing too much of it at the moment, disaster skills training. How to use a fire extinguisher, how to check on utilities, how to construct an emergency toilet. There are a number of videos at their emergency management website on how to do a lot of these things. I hope they start doing actual classes again in the near future. Okay, go to n7kuw.com/handouts with a capital H, and you will see the laundry list on the left. Included in that are all the handouts I've shown you here. There's the list that you can download, and I drew the arrow to the handout list, is going to come out as a front to back sheet of paper if you print it. It's got all of that information, and on the back it's also got all of the links that I showed you at the beginning and end of the presentation. And there's a ton of information there, well worth perusing, and you could spend hours just looking at the different handouts. There are a few that are definitely worth coming up with. And again, the links that I showed at the beginning, seattle.gov/emergency management, OEM@seattle.gov, email for the city, Office of Emergency Management, my email, seattleemergencyhubs.org, and the link to the handouts. So do we have any questions in chat?
Something. Is there, I used to hear that you should get under a doorway or something like that. Is there a good secure, what's the best place for someone with in a wheelchair to do?
So if you can't get under something, you should get beside an inside wall. Stay away from glass. When I was a kid, they taught you to get in a doorway, and the reason is old construction had really strong frames around doorways. That's pretty much not necessarily the case anymore. You got an aluminum frame around a door. And the other thing is, Doors are designed to do this. And if you're in an earthquake and standing in that door's probably going to swing and hit you and knock you out from the doorway. So doorways are not a recommendation, but against an inside wall, protect yourself as best you can. I can't speak for anybody, but if you could drop out of the wheelchair and use it for protection over you, I mean, do whatever you can under the circumstances.
The other thing I was going to ask is water. How long does water last? So how often do you need to turn it over?
I change my water annually. I put a tag on it, and usually about April, May time frame every year, we'll take the water we got in storage, water the flowers with it, and refill the bottles. My wife gets all the credit for that. And you can keep water longer than that. You can also, there are ways to purify water, and some of the handouts in that laundry list at the handouts link has some water purification information.
I have one that's just a little bit more of a comment of something that I learned over the bomb hurricane. I live in Issaquah on the south side of Tiger Mountain, and the road that we live up on, there was probably 60 trees that blocked access out of the town. And not only did we not have any power, no one's cell phone worked. If it wasn't for the community's chainsaws, we wouldn't have cleared the road for days. If anyone had had an emergency or a tree fall on them, which I was one of the few houses in our neighborhood that did not get a tree, all our neighbors took a tree. And what I kind of learned was not only to have a saw would have changed life or death situation to be able to get a log out of the road, but to know what neighbors had the missing pieces of the gear that I couldn't afford, didn't have access to. And when we started walking around the neighborhood, there was enough people that did have the little pieces missing. I had a saw, but I didn't have oil. And when we came together in a very short amount of time, from 5 a.m. to noon, we basically opened up roads for emergency vehicles to be able to make it up that we would have not had otherwise. So it just sparked some conversation of communications with neighbors that we had not talked to before, and we didn't move forward with this, but I had another friend that did, of having a community plan. So not only plan for the household, but a community plan of the neighborhood of who has different resources to be able to share in that time.
I think in general, rural people have more contact with their neighbors than urban people. You tend to know who has the chainsaw, who has the tractor, who has the whatever. But exactly, that's a perfect example of utilizing, knowing what resources are available and making use of them. The availability of chainsaws. Here in the city, we don't think about that very much. You don't have to cut down too many things with a chainsaw. But if you're urban, if you're rural, that's absolutely going to be a concern. Any place in our surrounding communities have much greater tree cover than we have in the city. More.
One of the things that we learned too, because there were so many trees that went into houses, although the main structure of the house was okay, there was now a hole in the roof. And so if you did not have a tarp, so we found out that tarps became very important for a lot of the neighborhood. At least you can seal your house in temporarily, put some sandbags on or whatever, and seal in your house so you can still have protection from the weather.
And tarps are also a valuable resource for sheltering. If you're not covering your roof, you can make a tent out of a tarp. So yeah, having a few tarps in your supplies is always a good idea. You just, like I say, try to think through, imagine yourself in the situation where you don't have this, or this, and what am I going to do about it? And where am I going to keep those supplies so that I can get to them, and et cetera. And in many cases, there's not a perfect answer, but any answer is better than no answer. Any plan is better than no plan. A friend of mine quotes World War II or prior general, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. But you know what? If you got a plan, you can then adapt it as necessary once you know who the enemy is and what they're presenting you. More. Quiet audience.
I had one question. When you were talking about things to keep in the car, and I don't know who will be best to answer this question, but maybe someone online, about things someone might need related to a wheelchair if they are, we talked a lot about shoes and other ways of getting around, but what extra equipment might people need to keep in their car? If they're not going to be, if they're going to need a wheelchair to get around in an emergency, like, would people bring extra parts?
I'm going to walk back towards her just so I can hear her better.
Sorry.
The people in the audience hear you, but
I keep a flat kit so I can repair flats for air tires.
We were just talking about if you're needing a wheelchair to get around and you have a car kit, what else should you bring? And what came up was a flat repair kit. And certainly if there are other answers, that would be great. That makes sense to me.
and again, that's where you can again work with your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers. It's usually I ask, has anybody here been through an earthquake? And most time I get some hands. I've had people from Loma Prieta, I had a person from the earthquake in Japan and the tsunami there. I mean, there's a lot of, and they bring, I've been there. Here's my experience and what I want to do about it. So, yeah, talk to each other, talk to your friends, talk to your coworkers, talk to any professionals that you encounter. I mean, again, like I think I mentioned at the beginning, once you get a room full of people, 10, 15, 20 people, it's incredible the depth and breadth of knowledge and skills and experience you can find in an audience. Throw the question out there. Email. Do you have a group email of your coworkers? Throw the question out, assuming you're not, misusing your resources, but throw the question out there. Hey all, I got this question coming out of the presentation I heard the other night, and what are your thoughts? Kathy.
I just wanted to mention that
The mic.
I just wanted to mention that they also, did you want to show them this?
Yes.
This is kind of a neat thing to carry in your car. You can put it in the window, and on one side it says help, and the other side it says okay. And hopefully somebody's going to pull over if you've got that help sign in your window.
This is meant for your home to put in your window, so a neighborhood response team, they're saying help, we better go check on what's going on. They're saying, okay, we don't need to waste any time knocking on their door. But yeah, keeping one of these in your cars can also be, who knows? It's not an official anybody sign, but if you see a sign in a car that said help, you might well stop and see if what they needed. Back up to the...
Yeah, I imagine we have some people who it would be more challenging to just get out of the car onto a road that is destroyed and try to find the nearest grocery store. That may not be an option for some people. So I think great to have these options of how do you call people's attention to, hey, I'm making it in my car for the time being, and what you might want to keep in your car in that situation.
And the greater your individual challenges are in responding to in a disaster, mobility issues, medical issues, whatever,
Yeah.
factor into your personal plans and preparations. Having that help okay sign in your car might be a great idea. Having a two-way radio of some kind might be a great idea in addition to your cell phone. Having a spare battery. I mean, in my backpack I've got 2 battery banks that I can recharge this from multiple times. Think about what the possibilities might be, what the needs might be, and what you can do to prepare to meet those challenges.
Would occupational therapy be a resource for people with trying to make those kinds of plans and what equipment they need?
Yeah, I think therapists in general may be good options for some of these plans, maybe particularly occupational therapy. I think something we should keep talking with the team about. And I know we have people on our Zoom right now who maybe have some experience, and if you guys want to send us messages, that's great. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to but yeah, I think hopefully therapists are preparing people somewhat both in the inpatient setting and outpatient setting for what do you do in an emergency. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. I think this was a great presentation, and don't forget to fill out your surveys and your evaluations for
And thank
credit.
you all for your time and participation.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the SCI Forum podcast. To learn more or to make a donation, please visit sci.washington.edu.